Rita ji, excuse me, you're muted.
Yeah, a very good afternoon to all of you. Now we are going to start this webinar. I'm Rita Sharma, Associate Fellow TERI and coordinator of this webinar on fighting fake news, misinformation and cybersecurity issues. TERI is hosting this webinar in collaboration with UNESCO to address the issues of fake news and cybersecurity challenges which are very prevalent these days. And this is our third webinar in a series of 3 webinars with UNESCO. And our previous 2 webinars with UNESCO in this series also received an overwhelming response all over the world. And for this webinar, we have a distinguished panel of speakers from various sectors such as government, corporate, and academia. And but before introducing our speakers formally in front of you, I would like to make few announcements. Like if you have any questions, please post in question answer box only, and we will take only selected questions posted in the question answer box. Only one questions will be taken after each presentations, and remaining questions we will address at the end of this webinar. And there will be 4 opinion poll questions which will be posted during the webinar. And I request you all to please be alert and vote your opinion during these opinion poll questions. And so without much ado, now I will like to invite Dr. P.K. Bhattacharya to please deliver the welcome address of this webinar. Dr. Bhattacharya is Senior Fellow and Associate Director, Knowledge Resource Centre, TERI. He also functions as Coordinator and Head of Environmental Information System on Renewable Energy and Climate Change in TERI. So with this, over to you, Dr. Bhattacharya, sir.
Thank you, Rita, for inviting and giving me this privilege to welcome all of you. So, respected distinguished panel, each of you are well known in your fraternity, and we all love to hear from you today and understand and become more knowledgeable on this. I also welcome all of you who are participating in this webinar, and I hope that you will all learn from this distinguished panel as well. So as Rita was mentioning that, this webinar is on fighting fake news, misinformation and cybersecurity issues is well conceived by both TERI and UNESCO in order to, give a more thrust on what kind of, problems or challenges we are facing. As you all are aware that these days, most of us are working in digital space. In fact, as figure says, over 3.2 billion people are using emails, and which is likely to enhance to 4.3 billion by 2023. Over 2.9 billion are using social media every day. So in essence, substantial portion of our education, business, banking, financial transactions, government services related all activities are done using social media, fully or maybe partially. So in recent time, what is happening that this has increased, much more, manyfold after COVID-19 induced restriction. So misinformation, data breach and related security issues are therefore gaining a lot of priorities these days. Popularity of social media sometimes spreading, misleading information like wildfire everywhere, and which is results to, we know that from the rigging of elections, as was repeatedly saying in US, to distorting truth and to harming, people's interest. So what can be done to ensure there is a balance between free speech and the accuracy of information? So we have to, have a balance between these two. So that's basically the, agenda today also. Recently, the Lloyd's Register Foundation World Risk Poll provides a first global picture on how the world's citizens see risk and safety, and the difference between perception of risk and actual experience. So this brings a new depth to our understanding of risk. Misinformation is the greater concern than any other online security risk like cyberbullying or fraud, schemes of like that. This online poll, which consider more than 150,000 interviews across 142 countries, found that 57% of internet users believed that fake news was the biggest threat. So without further delay, so this is the actually the perception of people, and under these circumstances we are holding this webinar. So I hope that you all will find the content valuable and would support your work in future. So with all this, I stop here and will learn from all of this distinguished panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bhattacharya, for such a warm welcome address. And before introducing the moderator of this webinar, I would like to pose the opinion poll questions. So everyone, please ready with your phone and devices. So here is your opinion poll question 1. There should be a new laws to protect privacy on the internet. Agree, strongly agree, disagree. I request you, all of you, to please vote your opinion. Our speakers can also join this opinion poll voting.
No, Rita, panelists can't join.
Okay, you cannot. Fine. So I will read out the result. 65% participants says they are agree with this. 32% says strongly agree, and only 2% says that they are disagree with this. So now it's time to introduce the moderator of this webinar. And the moderator of this webinar is Mr. Hezekiel Delamini. Mr. Hezekiel is the advisor for communication and information for South Asia at the UNESCO New Delhi office. He holds a Master of International Business Administration from the United States International University and other postgraduate diplomas. Before joining UNESCO New Delhi, he worked with UNESCO in Paris, Nairobi, Accra, and Harare, and has more than 30 years of experience in supporting communication and information policies and practices in developing countries, especially in Africa. So with this, I hand over the entire proceeding to you, Mr. Hezekiel. Over to you, Mr. Hezekiel.
Thank you very much, Rita, and thank you all for joining us today. The webinar today has been introduced, and the subject matter also has been introduced: misinformation and cybersecurity issues. I have the singular honor to introduce in more detail the eminent panel or panelists that we have today. I'll start with Mr. Shlow Rao, who is the General Manager, Capacity Building and Legal Officer at Digital India Program, that is the National E-Governance Division at the Ministry of Electronics and IT. As a Chief Investigator of Cyber Law, Cybercrime and Digital Forensics, recently launched a capacity building program to build 1,000 judicial and police and other law enforcement officers' careers. He also played a role at a senior consultant level at the same department, offering legal advice on commercial and litigation matters, cyber crimes, data protection, and writ jurisdiction issues related to Arakyasetu and other applications which were hosted by Meitwai with the help of the department, NEGD. He is a subcommittee member of Personal Data Privacy Bill 2018, and currently is currently working on data governance framework on non-personal data. He is the Master of Law in Cyber Law and Cybercrime, and is undergoing a doctoral program, and core research area is non-personal data, data governance, and IPR. That is Mr. Shlow Rao. I go to the second speaker today, is Dr. Pavan Dugal, who is advocate of the Supreme Court of India. While a practicing advocate in the Supreme Court of India, Dr. Dugal has made an immense impact with an international reputation as an expert and authority on cyber law, cybersecurity law, artificial intelligence law, and e-commerce law. Dr. Dugal has been acknowledged as one of the top 4 cyber lawyers around the world. WDD, which is the World Domain Day, recognizes him as one of the top 10 cyber lawyers around the world. Dr. Dugal is the founder and chairman of the International Commission on Cybersecurity Law. He is also the president of cyberlaws.net and has been working in the pioneering area of cyber law, cybersecurity law, and mobile law. Dr. Dugal is also heading the Artificial Intelligence Law Hub and Blockchain Law Epicenter. He is the founder, cum honorary chancellor of Cyber Law University. Our third speaker is Dr. Aparajita Bhatt. She is professor, Faculty of Law at National Law University here in Delhi. Dr. Bhatt is a gold medalist and university topper in both LLM and LLB. She specializes in business law. She teaches cyber laws, corporate law, and mergers and acquisitions at NLUD. She has been a resource person at various workshops, national and international conferences. She has been a course coordinator at UCG Swayam MOOCs, and also UCG EPG Pathshala course on information and communication technology. She is the director of the Center for Cyber Laws. Her areas of interest are corporate laws, securities and financial market regulation, mergers and acquisitions, and cyber laws. The last but not least is our fourth speaker, who is Mr. Avinath Akava, Director of Information Technology, especially looking at Telecom Engineering Center within the Ministry of Communication. Mr. Akaval is an Indian telecom service officer with over 27 years of extensive experience in information technology, telecommunication, and broadcasting. As Director, Information Technology at this department, at the India Standards Development Organization, his role includes framing policies, standards, and guidelines, as well as test procedures for IT equipment and emerging technologies. Previously, as Additional Director General, IT at India's public sector broadcaster, he headed various digital transformation initiatives for the twin network of Doordarshan and All India Radio, and also successfully delivered the News on Air digital platform and mobile app. He also serves as State Head of Haryana and Senior GM BBNL for rollout of BharatNet project under the Digital India Initiative for providing optical fiber cable connectivity to 6,000 plus Gram Panchayat in Haryana. Panchayat in Haryana. He is the chairman of the working group on anonymization of data supported by MateY, and also chairman of the working group 2 on standardization of artificial intelligence technologies under DOT. So this is the panel that we have today, and we will start with the first short address from Mr. Rao on information disorder and legal framework to control the information disorder. Over to you, Mr. Rao.
Thank you, Mr. Ezekiel. Thank you for giving me an opportunity. And first of all, I would like to thank Dr. P.K. Bhattacharya and Ms. Vita and inviting me for this session, and TERI, and along with my distinguished panelists, especially Pawan sir. It's a privilege to be with you and with your international repute, and along with other panelists. Thank you very much. And without taking much time, I'll quickly go into the presentation. You're able to see my screen? My screen is visible?
Yes, Mr. Slow, we can see.
Okay, so the topic which was very aptly chosen, I congratulate TERI for bringing out such a wonderful topic. And the topic of today, we are talking about fake news and misinformation and the impact of fake news and misinformation in the society. To be honest, I would like to make it a little more precise. In fact, when we look at from the legal perspective, what exactly the fake news is doing is it is actually creating a information disorder. And normally when the information which is said tend to be communicated to the general public, and if you give a different meaning to that, and the information becomes a disorder. And this is a very age-old technique used by state actors when there is a war between two countries or in order to influence the neighboring states. But later on, now what happened, this has actually percolated down. Now it has been spread into microsegments, and now emergence of social media, it became a very imminent threat. Now the situation is such that in future we don't require chemical bombs and nuclear bombs to fight a war. We just need an information to fight a war. So we are going to face information wars in the days to come. Still my presentation is visible? Yeah, thank you. Okay, let me make it very simple. See, this is something information disorder is all about. In a nutshell, I would like to show you. Basically, information disorder covers all three aspects: misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. So this is a source of Council of Europe came up with a very beautiful report in 2017. So they have covered all three aspects. In fact, the Council of Europe didn't even touch the fake news. Actually, they termed fake news is a very misnomer, and they said fake news can be sometimes, if I don't like a news, I may consider this a fake news. So they have actually kept fake news in a different zone, but they actually started looking into what is behind the news which actually causing a disorder, this information disorder. So if you have an information which it tend to be false information and it has no harm, then straight away that falls into misinformation category. It means false connection, misleading content, some kind of this kind. But there is a very extreme of it, that is malinformation. So if you go to the malinformation, it is harmful. Basically, any information I encode and send it to the recipients, which actually causes a potential hate speech or potential harassment and leaks, that actually very harmful to the society. To be honest, this is a very true information. It is not wrong, but this information is not meant for public consumption, not meant for actual consumption of the public. So this kind of information which comes into the public, which may, this like WikiLeaks or some kind of leaking information. So this causes the malinformation falls into that category, and they're actually very harmful. And there's one category which I think we need to add to our discussion is disinformation also. The misinformation and disinformation are actually both sides of coin actually. If you look at it, misinformation without harmfulness, but when you send an information with a false context or having an imposter content or maybe a manipulated content and fabricated content, that actually harms the society at large. So quickly going into, so what I propose whenever we go into the handling such situation, a legal framework, how a legal framework should look like, it must have three stages. Stage one, this is my own research work when even I shared this hybrid influencing conference with the Council of Finland. One is we need to have a strong IT policy interventions. So this is something very important. Like at this stage, many people think like whenever a government comes out with a regulation or a rule or a immediate impact on the people's mind is, oh, my freedom of speech is curtailed. I feel that government is regulating, it is censoring, government is doing something which is not acceptable. See, this is that's something, this echo chambers are actually being built. So into media and other factors. So very strong IT policy interventions are required. But having said that, there should be a very fine balance between the legal aspirations of the citizens with respect to freedom of speech and right to liberty, right to life. And this should be very specifically focused towards curtailing the miscreants who actually have a wrong intent, who wanted to harmfully spread some wrong messages in the society. Second stage is we need to have a uniform legal code or norm. Basically, I'm talking about code or norm. Basically, this code or norm something which supplements the domestic laws. Like internationally, when the information spreads, like for example, any information in US now through WhatsApp, we can get it in seconds, and just we can pass on through Signal, all these mobile applications where we can get a lot of information. So information actually travels cross borders without any any restriction. I'm sorry, I think it's showing unable to show my. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
My screen is visible. I'm getting a message in the screen.
Yes.
Okay.
Screen is visible.
Now, then third one is very importantly, we need to build the capacity of our law enforcement agencies and other stakeholders. So this is a very important aspect. This is how I conceived the idea of coming out with an online capacity building program, where I had a very peculiar situation. My CEO happened to be the current current Chief Secretary of Meghalaya. When he came as posted as a CEO NEGD, he just faced a law and order situation in Meghalaya. One person posted some material in the Facebook. It has created a law and order triggered, and the state machinery has some issues how to handle the situation. Since I had an experience of handling both legal and technical side, my CEO asked me to, can you help the legal point of view? When we started working out and help the state machinery to resolve the case, then we understood that there are a lot of lacuna is there, and we need to build the capacity of the law enforcement agencies and the people who are associated with the law enforcement agency. Law enforcement agency, not only the police, the administrators, even the judiciary, public prosecutors also need to be educated about it. If we don't do that, then the prosecution will not get a positive result. So I'll just quickly give you some tools. This is a techno-legal aspect, how we can control, we can minimize the impact of the fake news. Right? This is we normally use these techniques in. If you are a technocrat, you'll know what I'm using this word. These are cybersecurity principles. All the cybersecurity principles I just modified to the extent where it can be used in a human psyche. First, we need to build an ecosystem and to the public, like zero trust policy. We need to tell our citizens or the audience that don't trust everything. Whenever you receive through WhatsApp or something, any message through email or any propaganda which is happening through vested interest. So we need to help them out with a policy where we can create a trust authenticated search engines. Like in Council of Europe, they have actually come up with a suggestion that authenticated search is required. If you come across any news, just post this news and search and know whether this news is true or not. Then the government point of view or a social, this public and government point of view, we need to do a lot of continual research, and we need to in order to come out the more truths about it. In fact, I know Pavan sir will be handling much more about it. There are a lot of technological advancements, like we have autobots, we have deep fakes. These are all used nowadays in order to propagate a false or false narratives. So one need to have continual research and identifying where exactly is the problem. And very importantly, now the government initiative of regulating this, the intermediary rules which published by the MAITI is a welcome step. To be honest, if you look at it from the right perspective, it's a welcome step. And also, that's what I was trying to say. We need to build the authenticity engines where this can help the citizens to know which is a fake information, which is rightful information. Then very importantly, I come to the third point. I just quickly say we need to have a T minus and T plus. Basically, this is the meaning is when I get a false news now, I take some time to react. The time between this T minus 1 and T plus 1 is the time the maximum damage takes place. So we need to minimize that. So we need to detect the blind spots. So we need to identify and how we can overcome that. And finally, we need to have a complete cybersecurity policy in terms of information and behavioral analysis. We need to see who is actually the culprit who is doing this activity. See, without the technological help, he cannot do it. So the architecture, the ecosystem must have a cybersecurity as a service where one of the pattern is to identify the wrong element who is perpetuating or actually spreading this information or like in the form of I said this and malinformation. We need to identify them in a proactive manner. So that kind of services we need to bring in very quickly. And lastly, I would like to talk about the legal frameworks. Trust me, there is no law we can directly bind. Even you catch a criminal, even you catch somebody, we can't directly nab them. We need to interpret through, in penal code. We need to take IT Act subsections, then build a narrative about the case solving. It's a very cumbersome. So we need to come out with a uniform global framework to handle the fake news at national and international level, and the international norms which can supplement the domestic laws harmoniously, and that helps to build the capacity of law enforcement agency. So lastly, I conclude with this. This is a model I propose that 4R model. Like we need to have first recognize the blind spots in order to, this is actually blind spots in assets where we can able to identify the real culprits, right? And we need to, now after identifying the blind spot, we need to define the technology to handle this kind of threats. Then we need to come with the redesign. We need to change our policies very frequently, not in once in a decade, a dynamic level of policy, and both at a technological as well as legal perspective to monitor the threats. So redesign, recognize, and redesign. Then we need to resist with a definite enforcement policy. We need to give a secure access to the citizens. We need to have a very good control process within the system, and law enforcement need to be strengthened with the arms, like they need to have weapons to resist. And finally, build and rebuild. And our technologies cannot remain same, so we need to build and rebuild. So this 4R model, and it is a continuous, it not ends. Again, go back, recognize, redesign, resist, and rebuild. So if we build this kind of a framework, I hope we will be in a position to handle the fake news and able to minimize the threats of the fake news in the society. So this is how I propose that to the audience as well as the panelists, that we can able to move forward to handle the fake news and misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. And this is the way we can control it. Thank you very much for giving me. I hope it is useful. I'm open for any questions from the audience or any discussions. I'll be here for the whole session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rao. It was very enlightening. Many of us have learned new things, and the challenge is rebuild, as you have said, both the technology and the human capacities. It's an ongoing challenge that perhaps will live with us for some time to come. Thank you for that presentation and for the address. I will now check with Secretariat if there are questions from the audience before we go to the poll, the second poll question.
Yeah, Mr. Hezekiel, right now there is no questions. Maybe the participant will post in between or at the end. So we will, if there is any question related to Mr. Flo's presentation, so we will take it at the end. So now it's time for the second opinion poll question. Yeah, it's yeah, participant, please vote for this. The question is, do you think major technology companies should be doing more to protect people from fake news? Yes, no, not sure. Now I will announce the voting results. 72% says yes, 14% no, and 16% vote for not sure. So over to you, Mr. Hezekiel. Sir, you are muted.
Yes,
Mr. Hezekiel. Yeah.
I'm not audible. I'm okay.
Yeah, you are audible, sir.
All right. Thank you very much. Yes, now we can go to the second speaker, Dr. Dugal, and he will make a presentation on new Indian regulatory and policy approaches on fighting fake news, misinformation, and cybersecurity breaches. Over to you, Dr. Dugal.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. It's a pleasure to be amongst such a distinguished panel. I will try to share my screen. And I hope that my screen is visible.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Thank you. So I thought.
So your screen is not visible. We cannot see your presentation.
It has gone out. It's gone away now.
Is it now visible, please?
Yes, it is. Yes.
So you can see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So I thought, since this is a UNESCO and TERI webinar, let me try to give a more international perspective before I start coming on to the Indian approaches to deal with these immense problems. Well, there is no denying the fact that coming of COVID-19 has been the singular most important contributor in the further growth and evolution of fake news, both globally and specifically in India. The lockdowns, the fear, and the panic all contributed to massive increase of fake news across the world. And clearly, this has been a global phenomenon. While we have seen countries like Singapore, like Malaysia, and like France coming up with dedicated laws to deal with fake news, we also started realizing that countries were not very okay with coming up with dedicated laws on fake news. So you began to see a hybrid model where, for example, in India, India does not have a dedicated law on fake news, but decided to regulate fake news by means of secondary legislation, being the rules under the Information Technology Act, which the government notified on 25th of February. Actually, I look at the holistic perspective. The work from home has actually done a lot of good, but also a lot of bad as well. Because the work from home has become a fertile ground for dissemination of fake news, of information, of misinformation, and of course, with increasing vector of cybersecurity breaches that are happening, targeting the devices that are being used while working from home. Massive cyber attacks are happening globally, including on critical information infrastructure. Even in India, there's a massive debate. In November or October, we saw the power grid in Mumbai actually collapsing for a couple of hours. And now it's come to knowledge that it's actually thanks to some handicraft of some hacking attacks done by other state actors. When I look at the global cost of cybercrime, it's going to exceed more than $8 trillion by the end of 2021. And in this scenario, I think if there's one element that's playing a very vital role, it has got to do with video conferencing. We've come to recognize video conferencing as a central lifeline. But video conferencing is not only itself being targeted by cyber criminals, but also is being used for dissemination of misinformation, fake information, and of course, is also being specifically focused by cyber criminals and cyber security breaches. So much so that all things connected with vaccine, including vaccine supply chains, are now repeatedly being targeted by means of cyber security breaches. And this is what is the warning that's coming from Interpol. The lockdowns actually had a direct detrimental impact. Actually, cyber criminals went ahead and weaponized fear and panic all across. And then thereafter started targeting people. Even today, when a large number of people are still working from home, this entire work from home paradigm is contributing to a lot of misinformation and information, given the fact that the connectivity with people is likely missing. So in this context, it's but natural to expect that cyber security breaches will be galore. We have to be mindful of the fact that the golden age of cybercrime has already begun with the coming of COVID-19. And more cybersecurity breaches tells us this is now the new normal. Every 11 seconds, one company anywhere in the world becomes a victim of a ransomware attack. And therefore, countries increasingly are now being called upon to come up with dealing with the legal and policy issues pertaining to cybersecurity. At an international level, I find a vacuum. There's no international cybersecurity law in place. So countries have said, look, we don't want to keep on waiting endlessly for this vacuum to be filled up. So let's start addressing the multilateral issue of cybersecurity through national legislation. Different countries have begun to come up with dedicated national laws on cybersecurity. And the latest one that's come up is Myanmar, apart from countries like China, like Singapore, Vietnam, and of course, Australia. So this is a list that's continuously growing, but I expect more and more very rapid developments in cybersecurity law to take place in the year 2021. Incidentally, India does not have a dedicated cybersecurity law. Its national cybersecurity policy of 2013 has been a mere paper tiger, and now the government talks of coming up with a national cybersecurity strategy to inform the decisions of all stakeholders. Well, with cybercrime everywhere and nowhere to go, it's very, very clear that we have to have a holistic approach of not just on cybersecurity, on cybercrime, but also on fake news and misinformation as we go forward. Complicating the entire scenario is this entire very rapid advancements made in artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is now beginning to be used both for disseminating and publishing fake news, as also for identifying fake news or misinformation. So it's clearly a double-edged sword. We don't know which direction it's going to go, but with more and more artificial intelligence being used for increasingly perpetuating cybersecurity breaches from the darknet, it's a different ballgame altogether. Already, when you go to the darknet today, a number of sites there are advertising their offerings on cybersecurity breaches using artificial intelligence as a USP. Darknet is going to be a humongous problem. Unfortunately, most of the nations of the world are choosing to look the other way around. We cannot brush it below the carpet because a big chunk of fake news, of misinformation, and of cybersecurity breaches is emanating from the darknet. And hence, the legal, policy, and regulatory issues pertaining to darknet would need to be appropriately addressed. During COVID-19, I've been very closely examining the trends in cyberspace. And in my recent book, New Cyber World Order Post-COVID-19, I've argued that by the time the world comes victorious in the fight against COVID-19, we would have entered into a new cyberspace, which will have a new cyber world order. States will become very powerful. Clearly, cybercrime will be a normal day-to-day default. Cybersecurity breaches will be something that we'll have to live up to. And increasingly, states will be potentially targeting the enjoyment of individual liberties. No wonder a mass migration to the darknet cannot be ruled out. So as we are now working towards a new cyber world order, it's very, very clear that the parameters pertaining to fake news, misinformation, cybersecurity breaches need to be specifically looked at. From an international perspective, when I come down to India, I find that India does not have dedicated legal frameworks to deal with either fake news, misinformation, or of cybersecurity. India just has one mother legislation, being the Information Technology Act 2000, which is the only legislation pertaining to use of computers, computer systems, computer networks, computer resources, communication devices, and also data and information in electronic form. And under this particular law, the government has been seeking to cover a variety of endeavors which are aimed to regulate fake news and misinformation. And I think the route where the government has decided to address this is the route of intermediaries. Intermediary is a very broad concept under the Indian cyber law. Anyone who on behalf of another person receives, stores, or transmits any particular electronic record or provides any service with respect to that record clearly becomes an intermediary. Now, intermediaries in India have by and large been treated with a very soft glove approach, and they have been given a statutory exemption from legal liability. But now things are beginning to change. We've seen the winds of change coming in first from the Christchurch Declaration after the Christchurch attacks in New Zealand, and then last year when President Trump issued an executive order directing the Department of Justice to revisit the provisions of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which provide almost absolute immunity to the service providers. In this context, on 25th of February 2021, India has now come up with a game-changing approach and a move. India has notified the Information Technology Rules 2021, or what the full form is called the Information Technology Intermediary Guidelines and Digital Media Ethics Code Rules 2021. Now, these rules have completely sought to change the landscape. These rules have told the intermediaries that you may be located in India or outside. If your services are available on computer systems or networks physically in India, then you have to comply with these rules. You do not comply with these rules, and you will be stripped of your statutory exemption from legal liability, and you are liable to be criminally prosecuted under the Indian Penal Code as also under the Indian Information Technology Act. Here, there is a specific obligation on intermediaries that they must not publish or disseminate fake news. And the moment they get an appropriate complaint from an aggrieved person, they will have to start working and start removing the said fake news within a span of 36 hours. Also, any information which does not belong to another person or which is against the provisions of Indian law or which is tantamount to misinformation has also been brought within the ambit of coverage of these rules, and the intermediaries, once they are notified either by an order from a governmental agency or from a court order, are now mandated to remove it. They don't remove it within 36 hours and they face criminal prosecution. On cybersecurity, the rules have specifically mandated intermediaries to implement and maintain reasonable security practices and procedures, being the ISO 27001 standards for the purposes of ensuring cybersecurity. That's the way how a country like India is now, through subordinate legislation, trying to deal with the menace of fake news, misinformation, and cybersecurity breaches. Clearly, I think there's a need for building cybersecurity as a way of life in India and across the world as we go forward. As an honorary chancellor of Cyber Law University, we've created various courses including coronavirus, work from home, legal issues, cyber law, cybercrime, cybersecurity in coronavirus times, cybercrimes and social media and law, cybercrime and cyber law. And I think these courses, which have been done by 25,500 students from 172 countries, speaking 52 national languages, all tell us one writing on the wall, that there is a massive need for capacity building. And there's an immense requirement of this at a global level as we go forward. These online courses are being lapped across by not just students, but also by professionals, by academicians, and also by other stakeholders in the digital mobile ecosystem. I'll finally conclude by saying it's a constant journey in the fight against fake news, misinformation, and cybersecurity breaches. Cybersecurity will be your central lifeline point in the coming times. COVID-19 has changed ground realities completely, and hence we need to have fresh, futuristic and holistic perspectives on dealing with these entire issues. No wonder we can do that by means of cyber law as a discipline. And while whatever existing cyber legal frameworks are there, stakeholders are encouraged to ensure compliance with the same. But for those who feel that there are not specific provisions of the law, wait on. The year 2021 should see a lot of activity in this area by different countries in the direction of trying to regulate or go ahead and control the dissemination of fake news, misinformation, as also of cybersecurity breaches. It's a fascinating portion of history that we are currently in, and it will be interesting to see how the legal developments in this regard take place as we go forward. Thank you, sir, and over to you, Mr. Chairperson.
Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yes, sir, you're now audible.
Yes, I was just thanking to Gal for this very stimulating and thought-provoking presentation, which also was comprehensive. I mean, connecting international developments or issues to local issues as well. I think it was a very not only useful but timely presentation for many of our audiences and those who are following this webinar. Again, I will check with Secretariat if there are questions.
Yeah,
if
so
not,
there
we
is
can
question.
go.
Yeah, so there is question. So there is a question. Please, how can a country like Nigeria implement this model, Mr. Speaker? I think this question is for Dr. Pawan Duggal. Sir, you are not audible. Dr. Pawan, you are not audible.
For a country like
Yes.
Nigeria, the challenges are immense and are continuing to grow, primarily because Nigeria has been the capital of cybercrime in Africa and across in that part of the world. Also, though it's come up with an anti-cybercrime law, we've also begun to see massive increase of phishing, identity theft, and financial fraud, online financial fraud in Nigeria. The absence of adequate cybercrime convictions in Nigeria have further contributed to the entire scenario. So I think Nigeria is at a very important cusp of its historical development, where it will have to now come up with new holistic approaches to deal with these issues. They could either look at the models that have been adopted in Malaysia and Singapore vis-a-vis fake news, or even the French model, which could then be customized. Countries need to realize that mere cut and copy paste is not going to work. That phenomenon and that formula is always invariably a failure when you do that without customizing it within the requirements of the social milieu of your respective country. So they need to have dedicated fake news laws. On cybersecurity, they are increasingly looking in that direction of trying to do something in that regard. And it's not just Nigeria. I find a number of countries in Africa going ahead in the direction of exploring dedicated cybersecurity legal frameworks. And I think that's the way the world will have to go. You cannot keep on waiting for the vacuum at the international level to be filled up. And the reason for this is very simple. At the international level, please understand, state actors are doing both covert and overt activities. They do not want to be named and shamed in any kind of an international arrangement that they may ultimately create. So there's a status quo where there's a distinct hesitancy on the part of international nation states to go ahead and come up with international norms of behavior pertaining to cyberspace and cybersecurity. No wonder we find that the open-ended working group, as also the UN group of governmental experts of the United Nations, are still struggling to come to the basic unanimity as to how principles of international law are applicable to cyberspace. But clearly, I think Nigeria should not reinvent the wheel. It should look at what are the major legal developments in cybersecurity law. It could look at the laws that are passed in specifically China, in Vietnam, in Singapore, and even in Australia, and look at some of these new concepts that are emerging. For example, China has propagated this entire concept of cyber sovereignty, and they have actually defined it in very, very broad terms. Anything under the sun is part of their national security. Anything pertaining to cybersecurity is also part of their national security. Further, we have a country like Vietnam, which has come up with the concept of a national cyberspace. And they say that the entire internet is my national cyberspace where my laws would be applicable. Therefore, the cybersecurity law has been given extraterritorial applicability. Of course, reading and analyzing these models could be a great starting point for Nigeria, but the meat is specifically not just in passing these laws, but also in effectively enforcing them, because people in Nigeria are pretty tech savvy and they know different ways of how to bypass the legal frameworks. Hence, if we can also focus on effective enforcement of existing legal frameworks, that could also help ultimately Nigeria in fighting these particular challenges of today's times. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Pawan. We have 2 more questions, but we will take these after the next presentation. Over to you, Mr. Hezekiah. Oh yeah, it's time for the opinion poll questions. Yeah, so we will float our 3rd opinion poll question. In general, which is more important to you, convenience or privacy? Options are convenience, privacy, both. Everyone please vote. Yes, the 4% says it's convenience, 36% voted for privacy, and 59% say it's both convenience and privacy. Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Hezekiah.
Thank you very much, Rita. We go to the next presentation, our 3rd speaker today, and this is Dr. Path, whom I introduced earlier, and she will present on how propaganda impacts cybersecurity. Over to you, Dr. Path.
Thank you so much, sir. I'll just share my screen. Give me a second. Is my screen visible? Is my screen visible? Can you see the screen?
Yes, Dr. Abdul.
Great. Okay. So I would begin. 1 minute. I think I've lost it again. Yeah. So I would begin by thanking TERI University, the organizers, and Dr. Bhattacharya and Rita for inviting me here, for having me here. Thank you very much. And it's indeed a pleasure for me to share this platform, to be a recipient actually, because there are a lot of takeaways for me from the previous 2 speakers. Dr. Duggal, greetings from my side, and Mr. Rao. Quite impressive presentations. And I've noted the important points actually, which I thought would be useful for further research in this area. So because both the speakers have already covered most of the part which I wanted to share, I don't have much to say about this, but there are a few points which I would like to highlight when it comes to propaganda, cyber propaganda, and its impact on cybersecurity. So actually, the narratives regarding fake news, cyber propaganda, they can be linked with popular politics, they can be linked with digital colonialism, with the way media has been changing, it has actually weakened the mainstream media that has weakened, and also how the public sphere has transformed. All these factors have contributed towards the rise of fake news and cyber propaganda. Now, to begin with, fake news, this concept is not a very new concept, it's a very old concept, but the challenge related to it has amplified with the rise in digital media technology, as all of us know this already. And Pawan sir already mentioned this in his presentation, that this is just the beginning of the golden age of cybercrime. It's just the beginning. And it's a new world order altogether, which has been initiated and triggered because of pandemic. So we still need to see a lot what would happen in this area, different kinds of risks and challenges that would arise in cyberspace. Now, all these different synonymous concepts, propaganda, misinformation, fake news, rumors, you may call them by whatever name, but all of them are one or the other kind of information manipulation, right? And who are the targets of this information manipulation and why is it done? So basically, cyber propaganda may be targeted either towards the government, the state, its policies, or towards politicians, or also towards influential individuals, as we have seen. And we see in most of the cases where cyber propaganda was used at international level, particularly during the election times, we see how it has impacted the integrity of the election results. So I think this is something which is a matter of concern. Now, defining what is cyber propaganda, 1 minute, I'll just, yeah. Defining what is cyber propaganda, it is basically any kind of spread of information which is done through cyber medium, through the way of computer network, which is targeted towards people to shape up their public opinion in a particular manner, in a particular way, which is generally creating a negative impact on them. All right, so information that is created in a controversial way to shape the public opinion, to impact them in a particular fashion, which actually, creates a larger, broader impact on cybersecurity of the country and national critical infrastructure, and then other things also. Now, these are some most common and recent examples where cyber propaganda was used. We have seen its use in Kenya elections in 2017, and definitely it became very popular during 2016 US elections of Mr. Trump. In Nigeria also, this question was asked to Mr. Dougal also. It remains to be a major concern. When self-styled propaganda secretaries, they were recruited by governors and parliamentarians and all these electoral candidates in a bid to shape the political narratives and spread all this information, misinformation and fake news. So this remains a concern in Nigeria also. We also see this happening during different digital campaigns. So even Cambridge Analytica has agreed that it had engineered certain digital campaigns during the elections. The purpose was which to create a positive, to show some electoral candidate or electoral person in positive light and, smear someone's image negatively. So Cambridge Analytica had done this at various occasions. And recently we see it in India also, how during the farmers' protest, cyber propaganda was being used, was being done on a lot of social media platforms, including Twitter. A lot of misinformation was also spread, not only during farmers' protests, also during after the outbreak of COVID-19 in India. We see so many news which were that time quite popular in social media platforms about how did the Delhi police, they arrested people for spreading misinformation relating to COVID-19 and similar other things. So it has become one of the most common instrument or weapon or whatever, or tool, whatever we may call, to have an impact on the security issues of cyberspace. Now, why cyber propaganda? Why do people indulge in this? What can be the probable goals or objectives? One of the most popular, most obvious reason can be to discredit a target. Now, here a target can be the state itself, the government itself. It can be an individual, it can be a politician. To discredit him can be one of the goals. Then definitely changing the outcome of an electronic vote is another reason why cyber propaganda is being used, which we've seen in elections of so many countries, and then spreading civil unrest. When it comes to issue like spreading civil unrest and use of cyber propaganda to it, another important question which comes to mind is whether cyber propaganda has been used as a psychological warfare. Is it a psychological warfare? So we see other than state actors, even non-state actors, including terrorist organizations, extremist organizations, they have used cyber propaganda in the nature of a warfare against state or against any organization. So that brings us to the concept of weaponization of fake news and cyber propaganda by political parties, by terrorist organizations, by other extremist organizations. And all this poses a very, very serious threat to the nation's security, to cybersecurity. So it's an alarming situation, actually. Now, what are the different kinds of cyber propaganda tactics? they can be broadly divided into three categories. It can be done either through database hacking or machine hacking, or also spread of fake news, which is one of the way of propaganding. So database hacking is actually, getting into the settings of a private database and stealing important or confidential information which may be of strategical importance. And once that confidential information is stolen, they release that information in a very strategical manner. So this is how database hacking is done. Hacking of the very database where probably the confidential data is being stored. Machine hacking is hacking the very source of the result, which we see is a very common, very popular phenomena in cases of voting, where the voting machine itself is hacked. And spread of fake news, as we've already seen, even the last two speakers spoke about this, that how spread of fake news is also used to create cyber propaganda, and that negatively impacts cybersecurity. Now, these are the actors involved. As we know, they can be divided into state and non-state actors. So all those who come in the category of online criminals or foreign government or hackers or political activists, as we've seen in case of Nigeria, or terrorist and extremist organization, as we are seeing in case of the farmers' protest, they're relating it to Khalistan. We do not know yet what is the real truth. But still, a lot of fake news and misinformation and cyber propaganda is being spread. And definitely the malicious insiders, all of them are different actors involved to create this kind of information manipulation via cyber propaganda. Now, what are the modes of cyber propaganda? I think I've already spoken about this. They generally, it's very easy for the hackers to hack the databases or personal devices or mobile phones, and then after hacking it, spread messages very quickly and very easily. So it's like it's become such an easy thing these days that anyone can do this. So which again is a very alarming situation for law enforcement agencies, for international organizations, for all those people who are actually thinking and working about different issues of internet governance, how to restrain and stop cyber propaganda, which creates a negative impact on cybersecurity. There's another concept which has been talked about, which is synonymous to that of cyber propaganda, and that is, they call it cyber influence, which is actually similar to cyber propaganda or cyber warfare, whatever you may call it. It aims to create negative impact again on the people and manipulate their perception in a certain way. Now, this kind of cyber influence works in two ways. It may either create threats which are dangerous to the country's critical infrastructure, but not only that, they can also be leveraged to proactively shape the social and psychological fabric of society by manipulating the manner in which people perceive the kind of perceptions they have. They create a very dominant influence on their mindset, and this again is a very worrisome situation. Now, coming to how to protect against cyber propaganda, I think most of the points which I was about to propose here, they have been covered by Mr. Rao and Dr. Duggal. But however, for a layman, for a person who doesn't really understand law, legal framework, regulatory arbitrage principles, how does it work? These are the simple things which people can follow. So one is, we should not believe any information without checking the source of that information, because now it's an information disaster. It's an information revolution, and believing anything which is coming from anywhere to us does not make sense. So you should just check out the source of that information, where is it coming from, and then also check multiple sources. Then practice good information security to prevent the accounts from being breached and being misused. As we've seen, one of the most popular mode of cyber propaganda is database hacking or hacking of your system. And after hacking your database or your information, they can easily, use that information to create wrongful gain to their favor and wrongful loss to the society at large. So therefore, we should be very careful when it comes to practicing good information security procedures. And I would agree with Dr. Duggal when he said that we have to adopt cybersecurity as a way of life. It should become a very implied and inherent thing for us, that it should be a way of life. And then definitely use of social media should be done very, very responsibly. And we should also think very critically before we share anything. Because the moment we are online, we don't know, cautiously, unconsciously, intentionally, unintentionally, we are every single moment sharing our information with someone else. And how our information reaches the third party or someone else with whom we don't want to share it with, we are yet unaware of that entire process. And larger things and broader issues are being talked about in this context. I've recently contributed an article on digital sovereignty, and I've suggested that how it is a quintessential model for the new world order, especially after pandemic, when the risks have increased. How having digital sovereignty or maintaining digital sovereignty has become a quintessential model, and it's very important that the trend of digital colonialism is being shifted to digital sovereignty. So, we have to be very, very cautious about the kind of information we share on social media platforms. So these are some basic, very, very broad and general things. And these are some last set of recommendations to stop cyber propaganda. Mr. Rao has already given a very detailed picture and comprehensive picture about the legal framework on fake news and misinformation. However, these are some of the broad recommendations that in order to stop cyber propaganda, counter propaganda measures should be taken. And we have seen one such instance in the recent farmers' protest, where government tried to adopt such a counter propaganda measure. Second recommendation is that the law enforcement agencies and other state agencies such as police or other special agencies, they need to have expertise in these areas. So more focus on capacity building, as focused by Dr. Duggal also. He also said that we need to focus more on capacity building. First, capacity of the people who are into it, the law enforcement agencies. Then definitely we need strict monitoring and enacting laws which can prohibit cybercrime. So if we are able to bring down the scale of cyber crimes to a large extent, we would be able to curb cyber propaganda also. Then we need collaboration between government and social media agencies, because we know how all these propagationists, those who spread cyber propaganda, they use social media platforms to spread misinformation, to manipulate information. So there should be a very, very strict collaboration between government and social media intermediaries, social media agencies. We see a reflection of this particular collaboration under the new data protection bill also, where they have defined who is a social media intermediary, what would be his liability, what would be his responsibility. And also under the new intermediary guidelines for 2021, we see reflections of this kind of collaboration, where they are supposed to comply with the orders of the government whenever it comes to curbing concerns of curbing matters of cyber propaganda. And then government also needs specific expertise in this particular area, in this particular field. And the most important for all, which although sounds to be a very general recommendation, but a very important recommendation, raising social awareness about this. So unless people, social media users, internet users, they are not aware about, all the risks involved, they are not aware about how to share that information, they are not aware about their data protection rights, their online privacy rights, they are not aware about whether anyone can use cookies or not on their system. There's so many things which are involved in this context. So it's very important to raise social awareness to stop cyber propaganda. So that was a very, very small presentation on this, and I'm open to any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We're getting a bit of feedback, but I hope that's sorted now. Secretariat, can I check with you? Is that okay? I'm getting a little bit of feedback on my side. I don't know the same on everybody's device. But thank you very much to the part for that very, very enlightening and again unpacking concepts associated with cyber propaganda and cyber influence and all the intricacies that come with this with these issues, especially impacting on society and impacting on everyday users. The issues you've touched on, they concern all of us. But I think they concern even more those who want to work in this field a little bit further and maybe look and research for solutions in this field. Again, I will check with Secretariat if there are questions from the audience. And go to the next question. Thank you.
Yeah, there are questions. So, how to protect ourselves from phishing? And there is another question. What are the various attributes of fake news? I think these both are related to that I have put. So, over to you, Dr. Aparajita.
Yes. So actually, I'll answer the second question first with respect to different attributes of fake news. I just mentioned that different. You can use different terms instead of fake news. This can be misinformation. This can be rumored information. This can be cyber propaganda. So basically, any information which has been manipulated to be able to shape the public opinion in a certain manner, which creates a negative impact at large. Okay, that is the main ingredient which is common in all of these terminologies. We call it fake news, we call it misinformation, we call it information manipulation. There is a manipulation of information. A wrong news may be circulated amongst people, which may tamper with the public opinion at large. So I think, and that's how do we stop it? And another question was, what about phishing? So be it phishing, be it hacking, be it fake news, how do you stop it? The users, I believe, have to be very, very careful while they are online, and they have to be very mindful of their online practices, in the sense the way they are browsing net. So taking the phishing attack as of now, you have to be very careful as to what is the source of information which is coming to you. Okay, what is the source of mail which comes to you? Generally, phishing attacks are done mostly by hoax emails. So what is the source of email? You shouldn't believe any email which comes to you and take an action on it. You should be very careful. And immediately, if you think anything is fishy, anything is dubious, then you have to contact your bank immediately so that you can block your account, which happened with me recently, and I had to get my account blocked. And that's very easy. Getting your account blocked is very, very easy. Over a phone call, it can happen. So at least immediately you can take steps so that you don't lose your savings. And especially with respect to impersonation cases, phishing, which is a financial nature, and phishing wherein impersonation by the person is done in order to cause you any other kind of harm, that may also be checked. Again, you have to be very careful and check at the source of that information. Okay, so that kind of wisdom on the part of the person is very, very important. You have to be very diligent, very careful, and look around what's happening. It just strikes me, I can recall there was a case 2-3 years back where the judge of the Supreme Court, the retired Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, received a phishing email, and through this email he was asked by his colleague, another retired Supreme Court judge, to deposit a certain sum of money, 1 lakh rupees, into his account. And without verifying the information from his colleague, he quickly deposited that amount into the bank account which was mentioned in the email. Now that was a phishing attack. And if something of this kind is happening with the judge of the Supreme Court, a retired Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, you can imagine, the level of carefulness which we need to have. Every single email which comes to us, you should categorize them either as spams. You should set your privacy settings very carefully so that it doesn't reach you. And even if it reaches you, you have to be careful and double check the source of that information and do not react to it immediately. So I think that would be my advice on that.
Thank you, Dr. Aparajita. Now we will quickly take the opinion poll 4. Do you think that telecom companies should step in and must consider cybersecurity solutions for better services? Agree, strongly agree, not sure. Everyone, please vote. So 48% people believes Yeah, they are agree, and at the same time, the 48% says strongly agree, and 4% are not sure. Over to you, Mr. Ezekiel.
Thank you very much, Rita. We go now to the next presentation, the last but not least, and it's Mr. Agarwal who's going to present on fake news and convergence of media, looking at the case of telecommunication and IT, and considering or focusing on challenges and solutions. Over to you, Mr. Agarwal.
Thank you, and thank you, TERI. Thank you, Dr. Bhattacharya, and thank you, UNICEF, for giving me this opportunity. I hope you are able to see my screen.
Yes, sir. We can see.
Yes, yes, we are. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so like my previous three speakers have touched on the legal aspects, and I am going to touch mostly on the technical aspects of fake news, cybersecurity, or disinformation. So this is just a general thing that we all know that what effect of convergence of media, telecom, and IT has on fake news. Till recently, all the content that we were getting was mostly through conventional media. They had their trusted sources and correspondents. So the news would be news or any content would be verified before printing or broadcast, and responsibility could be easily fixed. So the possibility of fake news spreading widely was very limited unless the media houses themselves were involved in that. But now everyone has become a content creator. Anyone having a mobile phone with a camera, with an internet connection and access to platforms like social media, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and all. So they all become content creators or correspondents. So it has become so difficult to verify the genuineness of the content, and also the content spreads very fast. In a typical scenario, how a fake news typically spreads. So usually there is some originator. The originator could be IT experts or individuals or computer programs, which could be termed as bots. And then these could be state sponsored or politically biased or sponsored by corporates. So they generally create the content. Then it is propagated through social media, again, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and even various sites which specialize in propagating such kind of fake content. Then to increase visibility, again, technology is used, and artificial intelligence bots and other algorithms are used where fake accounts are created, and then they like and share the posts so that the visibility increases manifold. Now, humans also read these content, and then they also retransmit through instant messaging apps like WhatsApp and Telegram and all, also through social media shares, likes, and like this. So the propagation becomes very fast. And even traditional media houses, they also pick up these items from social media in the race to be first, and even without verification. So this gets into the mainstream also. Most of the fake news right now is being propagated or retransmitted through real people, though it might be originated through IT systems or any other means. So if we look at the role of emerging technology in generation of fake news or disinformation, then we see that lots of IT tools are available which facilitate in generation of fake content, morphing of image, natural language processing is there. So even on any video, voice of any individual can be morphed. Then there are we have internet and connectivity, so content available at any other place can also be accessed and used to generate fake content. We have even seen that some natural disaster happening in some other part of the world, and then the image or videos are shown as being happening in our country. Then social media have their recommender systems, which are artificial intelligence based systems, and then based on your choices, preferences, and past history, they uh, forward the message in according to the recommender system. But then they might be having algorithmic biases, so the news might not be neutral. Can we say that the social media is neutral, or whether they have certain biases? Another aspect is that the artificial intelligence systems and machine learning based systems might be fed by disinformation, so that their database itself is not pure and it is infected by disinformation. And again, this technology is used to generate fake traffic and increase page hits, so the search engines and the recommender systems would be misguided, and a particular kind of news or information would be projected to the readers or users. Then Cambridge Analytica was discussed by the previous speaker, and we see that artificially intelligent AI-based computational propaganda is already there. Hackers are also like hacking into real news websites and putting their information there. Can you see my screen? Okay. So how we can counter fake news? For this, a lot of things have been discussed by the previous speakers also. I would suggest that to counter fake news or disinformation, there should be a proper mix of use of emerging technology, policy intervention, as well as consumer or user awareness. So, like how technology is being used or can be used in countering fake news or disinformation. So the question is, can we use artificial intelligence to counter artificial intelligence? So again, the countering systems as well as the systems which are propagating fake news, both are based on artificial intelligence and certain algorithms. So if the algorithms of the countering system are better, then perhaps they might be able to counter certain fake news generation or fake news content. But till now, there is no fully automated end-to-end solution available which can like say that this is fake news, this is not fake news. But there are tools available which can do this analysis on in bits and pieces. Like we have reverse image search, shadow analysis is there. Like if some image or video is having shadows of objects or persons, then there are tools available which can tell you that if at any particular geographical location in the world at any particular given time of the year, what would be the angle of or length of the shadow, and by matching the shadow in the image with that analysis, it can be pinpointed whether the image or video has been shot at that location at that time or it is some fake content. So social media platforms are also using artificial intelligence and machine learning to detect bots, fake accounts, and even some kind of fake messages also. And they have been successful in certain areas like in containing adult content or terrorism kind of posts. But we cannot say that it is comprehensive and covering all aspects or all areas. So second aspect is of policy initiatives. Previous speakers have already told about the legislation and the legal aspects, so I will not touch that part. Platform providers are being asked by the government to address technical issues in traceability of the content. It should be possible to know where that content originated. They are being asked to have grievance officers and submit regular reports to the government. Under Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, Press Information Bureau has set up a fact-checking portal, and they are available on Twitter, Facebook also. So anyone from the public can ask them to fact check about government policies, any message or fact news which they think is not genuine related to government policies. So they can refer to the PIB fact check, and they have a trusted source to know whether it is genuine or fake. Similarly, many other private organizations, newspapers, media houses have set up their own fact-checking portals to facilitate whether the content is genuine or not genuine. In our Department of Telecommunications, in TEC itself, we are working on framing standards for artificial intelligence technologies, and these standards would also look into the aspects of algorithm openness, and benchmarking practices, so that if there are biases in the algorithms, in the machine learning or databases. So the end result would also be biased. So how to have benchmarking practices and how to see to it that the biases are properly addressed and the users are knowing the algorithm up to some extent. Under Ministry of Electronics and IT, work is going on to set up guidelines, to frame guidelines for anonymization of data. This would allow seamless interoperability of data, the genuine data. In the government, we have so huge amount of data, but it is not being used in the proper sense for machine learning, for artificial intelligence, because privacy issues might be there. But once the guidelines are there, it would be easy to share data and use it for research purposes also, and for countering disinformation, fake news, and for benefit of the public. Last thing is that as an individual, what can we do in countering fake news? So as Dr. Bhatt also said, most important thing is that don't trust any forward, do fact check. If we receive any message from our known sources, they might be involuntarily forwarding it, but it might not be a genuine content. So we have to fact check before forwarding it further. We should also rely on trusted sources of news. And if some image or video is there, we can simply check the metadata. There are lots of portals available. And from metadata, we can get lots of information about that image or video, even the date on which it was created, date on which it was modified, and lots of other things. Sometimes they even have geotagging. So we know that where actually that video or image was shot. So just simple metadata checking can lead to a lot of information. Also, we can use various portals to do the reverse image or video search and find out whether what is the source of this image or video. Very simple things can be done, like searching related keywords on search engines or social media accounts, and definitely we'll get related information. For shadow analysis, I mentioned in the previous slide also, and there are free portals available where we can, as a common one also, go and verify any image and check whether it is like the shadow is matching with the location and time of the event. And one very important aspect is that if we are getting any message or letter or document related to any government order or a scheme, then the simplest way is to visit that government website and see if the content is genuine or not. So these are some of the very basic things that can be done by individuals. So in the end, I will just say that like we have three verticals, like policy intervention, what the individuals can do, and what technology can do. So that's all from my side. And if there are any questions, then we can discuss those things also.
Thank you again. Thank you very much, Mal, for that enlightening presentation. I think everyone will agree that society is now called to higher standards of awareness and literacy on cyber issues. I think never before has society been called to these standards, these high standards of literacy and awareness. I will again check with Secretariat for questions and the next stage of Q&A. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Ezekiel. So we will quickly take only two questions here because we are already running behind the time. So question one is how national authorities may maintain balance for freedom of expression for people while dealing with fake news and misinformation. So anyone of you would like to answer? Dr. Abhijita, Mr. Slow, or Dr. Avinash?
Can you please repeat the question?
Yeah, how national authorities may maintain balance for freedom of expression for people while dealing with fake news and misinformation?
Actually, I don't have an exact answer to this, I'll be really honest. But I read a related line somewhere which said now there's a trend the trend is shifting from freedom of speech to freedom of hate. You know, under the garb of under the veil of freedom of speech and expression, how people feel free to spread hate speech, policies related to hate speech and all that content. So that definitely needs to be curbed. And we see a lot of related powers have been given to the government under Information Technology Act 2000. We have Section 69A and Section 69B, where people's freedom to speech and expression can be curbed if it is against national security, sovereignty of the country, against public peace, order, morality, all of that, right? So based on those grounds which are there under Section 69, the government has the power to block, put a restriction to all these kinds of freedom. So this freedom of speech and expression is not absolute. But however, at the same time, government should not be allowed to arbitrarily use this power and exercise it anytime, allow it to exercise this power anytime, justifying that this was required to protect national sovereignty. So this kind of balance definitely needs to be maintained. We also see in the case of internet shutdowns also, although that's not directly related to fake news and misinformation, but we see how internet shutdowns also have been ordered by government in Delhi, in Jammu Kashmir, in Rajasthan. To what extent government can, continue shutting down the internet services, and having internet connection and having all the services and facilities over internet is one of the right to life now. People can access basic facilities over internet, through internet. So it's basically one of the part of right to life. So to what extent? So we have this case recently, 2020, Anuradha Bhasin versus Union of India, where it said it cannot be for an unprecedented time. It cannot be for a very long time, internet shutdown. So there are inherent checks and controls under the IT Act, under the legal framework, through which this kind of balance can be maintained.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Aparajita. One more question here.
You want to take a different take. Actually, that question was you said only government. I don't think only government can solve this problem. To be honest, it is a complete stakeholder management with respect to society and government, education institutions, everything. First, I will start with the responsibility with the technical organization, the tech companies, the big tech companies. The big tech companies, now the intermediary guidelines has come up with a very wonderful opportunity. They can self-regulate themselves. So they can actually create an advisory councils. And as I told in my presentation, very importantly, they need to come up with authenticity check engines. Like they have the technology, they can build the technology very fast. Like if you expect a government organization to build, it takes time. And if you expect somebody else, so they can actually create authenticity engines, and that with their advisory council, with their own tie-up, so they can build. So with respect to government is doing its job. It is coming out with a lot of regulations. No technology company would like to be under the purview of a government regulation. Normally, they do so. One of the important aspects with the government is building capacity. Building capacity in every direction, like building capacity of the citizens, building capacity of the administrators, building capacity of the law enforcement agencies. It is a complete direction. So civil societies need to be really honest. They have to come out with when the government is right, they should stand for government. When this government is wrong, they should go and advise to the government saying that this is the area we are finding it wrong. Then academicians, very importantly, academics has to come out with a solid research. The solid research and solid, honest research and find fact findings. These are something which is required. And finally, there are so many NGOs are working. They take a lot of efforts in helping the society. They also can come out and they also can support some teaching programs. Like when it comes to fake news, I did a session with Andhra Pradesh police. One of the session, I said a teacher, parent, and student ecosystem can be created, right? So that can be built, and we can teach children what is the side effects of fake news and how fake news can be minimized. They can do the fact checks. Children are much faster than us, so we can actually, like, building the future. It has to be built from the go, like it has to be in all direction. Like if you build an ecosystem of this nature, I think the fake news and all those issues we can control very effectively. Thank you.
So we quickly take one more questions. How the cyber security problems are handled in India now? And with this, the people are sharing so many like registering in webinars. So is their data unsafe when you are registering for a webinar? So participants want to know, is their data unsafe and how the cyber security problems are handled in India now? So any one of you would like to answer this?
Well, in India, you are in a very much on your own mode as far as your data is concerned. Primarily because in India, there's an intrinsic problem. You do not have a data protection law as yet. Yes, your right to privacy is a fundamental right under Article 21 of the Constitution of India, which has been guaranteed and upheld by the Supreme Court in the case of Justice Puttaswamy versus Union of India. But please understand, India still does not have a privacy law in place. On top of it, when I'm looking at cybersecurity, it's a nation which is providing only lip service to cybersecurity. We don't have a dedicated law on cybersecurity. The National Cybersecurity Policy of 2013 has been a mere paper tiger. We have not been able to implement it. So the net result of all this is that, look, you will have to protect your own self. If you're registering from a webinar, please don't trust any and every webinar on its face value. Please see who's the person organizing it. What are the terms and conditions of the webinar? What is the privacy policy of the concerned organization that's organizing the webinar? Are they collecting your information? What are they asking from you? And where are they going to save it? How are they going to save it? What kind of a cybersecurity practices are they going to follow for the purposes of ensuring that your data is safe? And what is the guarantee that your data does not come up in the public domain or is being sold and that you're being spammed with all kinds of unwarranted calls, messages, and communications? So please don't sign up for any webinar just because the world is signing up, or just because there are some very interesting names, or just because the topic is very compelling. Please read through the terms and conditions, the privacy policy, the rules and regulations, if possible of the webinar, if available. If not, at least of the relevant organization which is actually going ahead and organizing the webinar, because that will give you a substantial inkling of how the organization is going to deal with your data. Well, technically, it also will depend on what kind of data they're collecting. If they're collecting normal data, your normal data is completely unprotected. Your name, your father's name, your address, your phone number, these are unprotected kind of data. However, in case if they are going to deal with personally identifiable data or sensitive personal data, say data information pertaining to your health records, your sexual orientation, your medical records, financial information, you need to be more careful. A lot of times these webinars are asking money from you. And if you're paying your money through your credit card or debit card, make sure that you're making only payment on a secure website or a secure platform, being an HTTPS, not an HTTP platform. So please do not wait for the law to come to your rescue after you've created a mess for yourself. Let's learn to have some proactive thinking. It's an age-old saying that a stitch in time saves 9. You have to make sure that you do your stitch. And how do you do your stitch? By being more resilient, by being more aware, and by adopting cyber due diligence as a day-to-day methodology for you. Let's learn to inculcate a culture of distrust and mistrust today. Why? Because with so much information around and with so much of anonymizing techniques around, you're still not clear as to where do you stand, who's your friend, who's your enemy. So learn first to distrust and mistrust any and every information till such time you have independently corroborated the same by means of your own independent corroboration, either through search engines or through reviews of customers or otherwise. And if it's any fly-by-night operator that's operating such webinar, it's a great idea to just give the webinar a go-by, because you do not know where this information that you're leaving behind will ultimately be used to potentially and prejudicially target you and impact you. And if you think my situation is gone, my data is gone, and now the law will come and help me, think again. There's no dedicated law in this regard, and there may not be any effective remedy available for you. So, as they say, when you're out to go out in a storm, carry an umbrella. Your umbrella for you in this scenario is just your due diligence, your appropriate acting as a reasonable person with reasonable prudence, trying not to be over adventurous, trying not to overbelieve people. Just try to ensure that your data is only shared on a need to know basis. The entire world does not need to know about their data. If you have those basic principles pretty clear, then to a large extent, I believe you can be relatively safe from potential misuse of the data that you give when you are registering for any kind of a webinar or any activity where any kind of information is being asked for. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Pawan. Any other speaker want to add this?
No, that is, I think he already covered comprehensively. When one is that cyber hygiene, he talks about society to practice the cyber hygiene principles, like being all the time alert about sharing their personal information. To be honest, if you want to know something about a person, now you just go to the Facebook, you come to know. Nowadays, people are even sharing where they are, which point of time they're, so they know they are sharing complete information. So someone tracking them, someone following them, they know exactly at what point of time where you are. And Google as a location tracking services and all social media tech companies are there. So one important aspect, I also endorse is that media organizations. See, when it comes to fake news and misinformation, the media organization and mainstream media need to play a very concrete role. They can't give a fabricated information to their audience. They have to have their own regulation. They have to check their content, what kind of content they are propagating. Like so, even Pawan Duggal was saying, we need to be build a system of everyone. It is cybersecurity is not that only one angle. It is a 360 degrees approach. So one needs to have a 360 degrees approach to build a secure India, secure nation, secure the world, or secure international cyberspace.
Thank you. So due to paucity of time, we cannot take any more questions, although we are flooded with the questions in our question answer box. So with this, I would like to thank all our distinguished panel of speakers, Dr. Pawan Duggal, Mr. Silo Rauji, Mr. Avinash, Dr. Abhirajita, and Mr. Ezekiel for supporting this event from UNESCO, and Ms. Ashita and Rama Devedi from the UNESCO for helping us to find out the best of the speakers for these webinars. And I would also like to thank Dr. P.K. Bhattacharya for encouraging us to conduct such kind of webinars on these interesting topics. So thank you all of you very much, and hope this association will go a long way. And this is not the end. We will definitely come back to you once again with some interesting topic. And thank you once again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving the opportunity. Thank you.
Namaste, sir.